Hello everyone, I created this analysis project in Power BI, and this goes over data that I collected from either the WHO or the World Bank. And first of all, I just kind of want to go into my data model a little bit to show you how this works. And I had this urban population table here that connects into a birth rates table, death rates, and fertility rates table, and also this life expectancy table as well. The life expectancy table I got from the WHO, while all the other birth rate, death rate, and fertility rates were provided by the World Bank. And what I was able to do is, let me just go into my urban population table. I was able to look at, for each year, for each country, from roughly 1960 to 2021, I was able to look at the birth rate, death rate, and fertility rates, and then calculate a net migration rate off of that. And what net migration rate is essentially, if you look at my formula here, it's essentially just returning the population growth rate plus the death rate minus the birth rate. And that would be in the net migration rate, because if you think about it, the birth rate minus the death rate is going to be equal to the natural population growth. But since we don't live in a closed system, we have to also incorporate the external sources of population, which come from immigration. So if you see a negative net migration rate, that means that more people left the country than entered, and then vice versa if you see it in a positive light. So now that we've kind of looked into that, we can talk a little bit about how I put this together. So each one of these tables, they came with a year in a country. So if you kind of scroll down, you can see, like, you can just see Afghanistan right here. So 1950 to all the way to 2050, they have the population forecasted here for this urban population table. So with that, I was able to calculate the population growth rate. You can kind of see the calculation here, which isn't very straightforward to do in Power BI. One of the limitations of Power BI, I would say. But in any case, I was able to use that in conjunction with the birth rate, death rate, and fertility rate to get the migration rate. But the way I was able to bring those data points into the table was by concatenating the year and the country, so that I would be able to have a unique key available for each one of these rows in the table, and then I could link that to let's say, for instance, the birth rate table, where I did the same thing, where I see Afghanistan, 1960, concatenate the two together, and you have a unique key for each row. So now I want to kind of go into what I was able to ascertain from this analysis, and I think it's pretty interesting because there's a lot of talk in the news oftentimes about immigration, or there's talk about birth rates, or I hear a lot. So something that I would like to kind of look at, look at the United States birth rate first of all. And I have it in here as USA. So you can kind of see that really, since the introduction of birth control or other family planning mechanisms, there's been quite a fall in the birth rate. So the one that you see in purple up here, that's the birth rate, and then the dotted line is the trend line over the same period of time. And that's another limitation within Power BI. You can't really look at it in more ways than just a linear regression. So if I wanted to look at it in do a polynomial regression, I wouldn't be able to do so in Power BI. I would have to do the analysis in Python and then import it in here, or do the analysis in even Excel and import it in here. But nonetheless, Power BI is a good visualization tool. So what you can see in the United States is you can see that really right here, right at this point, it's 2019 to 2020. See, there's a big jump in the death rate, and we would say that that's a lot of it. That is because of the coronavirus pandemic. So the death rate jumped during that period of time, but during the same time period, you could see that the net migration rate fell. It was still positive, but it had its impact on the population growth rate. And birth rates have been generally falling for a long period of time and continued along their trend. But what you can kind of see is that at this point, since the birth rate is falling, the death rate is rising. In order to get most of the population growth, it has to come from immigration. And that actually has been the case for a long period of time and will continue to be the case until either birth rate increases or death rates decrease. And since there isn't much indication that birth rates are going to rise for any reason, it will probably have to come from the death rates falling back down. But then you can also look at, and this is the case as we'll see in a number of different countries, most countries around the world really, that had higher birth rates at a time in the past, and then introduce some family planning mechanisms that resulted in a lower birth rate. You're going to see that the population will become more aged as the birth rate continues to fall and the population continues to grow. And that's really what you're going to see here, because you can even look at how life expectancy has changed over from 2000 to 2015. And so if you think like so maybe the last baby boomers were born in maybe 1964-ish, and you want to think that if you look at the average life expectancy even in 2015, you could think that, okay, well, 78 years plus 1964 means that that's going to be meaning that the youngest baby boomers will maybe finish off their lives in maybe 2039. So you're probably going to see the death rate stay elevated until roughly that period of time. So in order to get population growth, it's going to have to come through immigration. So that's just something to think about when sometimes people like demonize immigration in the press. But let's look at something else. Let's look at a country like Afghanistan, which has a notoriously high birth rate. So in this case, you see that the death rate and the birth rate are pretty much, they're pretty much static. And then what you kind of also see in because of that is that you get a largely static, it is falling a little bit, but you get a largely static population growth rate. You say it's like 1.6% here, and we're expected to be 1.6% in 2050, and is about 3% here. Is certainly falling, but not what we have seen in other countries. Like, just so we go back and look at the United States here again, and see that the population growth rate is definitely falling, while the other one was largely stable. And we can even look at other countries, say Japan. Japan is known to have a very high, very highly aged population, and Japan is even in a worse condition than the United States, because their birth rate started off not really even being that high, and it has fallen precipitously really ever since the 1960s, and they're just now, well, they've been for a while, but they've just now really started to see the effects of their low birth rates and aged population, in that their death rate is continuing to climb and really has been climbing for a while, but now their population growth rate is actually shrinking. So it's just something to think about, and we can do this for really any country that you would find interest in. Let's say another interesting case is, because we all know what's been going on in the Ukraine right now, and you can see the effects that the Ukrainians' war has had on Poland. You can see this huge jump in the population growth rate in 2022 was certainly caused by the migration that happened during the Ukrainian-Russian war. Anyway, that pretty much wraps this up, and in the future, I'll likely go back to this data model, and you can kind of look at so this life expectancy table. It looks at a lot of different things to try to determine what life expectancy will be. I will probably look at forming some type of multilinear regression based on that data there to see if I can predict what the life expectancy will be going forward, and then use that in conjunction with my population dynamics chart to maybe try to estimate when the death rate will start falling again, and when a country's demographics will start to improve. Anyway, if anyone has any comments or interests in this data, just say it in the comments section, and I can look into it more deeply. Thank you.